fellows. Well, welcome back in. We are here, episode 19, but it's a two-part series that we're doing, two-part episode really, and we're talking about goal setting. And so we chatted last episode on just what goal setting means. The two of y'all really shared what y'all been working on as Team Wilson. Y'all had recently just wrapped up, probably about a month or two ago, with your strategic planning, and y'all kind of went through that and shared how you did that as a team, you know, what you two of you as owners did, and how that was successful. I know we've always kind of had a plan in place for our ServPro team, but I know you talked about last year just really how you dove really head in first, right, to that. Like it was a big strategic plan. It was massive, but it really allowed us to know where we're going for last year. And we're just talking with our listeners a little bit about how they can do that in 2025. And we ended a little bit last episode talking about writing things down. You each shared, you know, how we do it. Each of us shared, we all have our own ways to do goals. And that's great. I think you can talk with a lot of people and you're going to hear a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, what works for you and makes you successful? That's right. And allows you to, if you're achieving those goals, how you get to it doesn't matter. And I think that's what we talked about. But talk to us a little bit. So Brady, we ended talking about writing goals. So we've written those down. You have some pretty cool plans and some acronyms that you've shared with us as a team a lot that allowed us to say, all right, we wrote these down. Are they the right things? So talk to me a little bit about what those are and really how it makes sure that what you wrote down is setting you up for success.
Yeah, Adam, be glad to. I mean, obviously, you know, we talked about this on the last episode, but this is a subject I'm really passionate about, and we are trying to give you somewhat of a recipe. But like you said, Adam, you have to make it your own. If you don't make it your own, then it's probably not going to get done. But yeah, where we left off was, the last step is writing it down, and so the next step is how do you make it actionable? And so there's some things that I've learned over the years, and like you said, acronyms. I love acronyms, and there's lots of them out there. But two is what we want to try to do is we want to try to make our goals smart and fast. Okay, so here's what smart means, and you guys may have heard this before. If not, we'll kind of break it down for you. And there's a common theme between making it smart and fast. And I'll give you a hint. The S is the same word. And so, like if you put this on a cross, then you can see the intersection between.
Y'all get ready to write it down.
Smart and fast. Yeah. So we encourage you to get your pens and pencils out earlier, or your phones, unless you're driving. But go ahead and get those out and write these down. So here's what smart is. The S stands for make it specific. So try to, and we'll give you a couple of example or two, but try to make it as specific as possible. The M stands for make it measurable. So how are you going to measure it? You've got to have, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that looks like. The A stands for achievable. You want to make something that's achievable. You don't want to make something that's necessarily out there that you can't achieve. So make it achievable. The R stands for make it realistic. And then the T stands for either timely or time specific. So let's break that down again. S, specific. M, measurable. A, achievable. Realistic and timely. So when you're going through, and let's say that we want to make a goal of being healthier in 2025. Okay? So this is just an example, and this is probably a lot of people's example. Coming up on the new year, we talked about New Year's resolutions and all those things, and I'm not really a big resolution type person. I'm a big goals person, but not resolution, because typically people don't stick to resolutions. But if we're going to break that down and follow this acronym, maybe it's, instead of just be healthier, that's not really a goal, doesn't meet the SMART criteria.
It's a very broad.
Very broad.
I mean, what does that mean?
And there's nothing you can really achieve there. So what we might say is maybe I'm going to drink a half a gallon of water every day. Okay, that's very specific. That's achievable, a lot of water. Or maybe I'm going to work out 3 times a week.
Yep.
Okay, so I can do that. Or maybe I'm going to only eat 1,200 calories per day. Now Benji, the whole Starbucks thing we talked about, you might have to lay off on that if this is going to be your goal.
Hey, I blew that at an Italian restaurant.
Those drinks can be almost 400 or 500 calories a pop, bud.
Actually, you did say, I think you said it was sugar free, so maybe not. I don't know.
That's true.
But
I actually went to an Italian restaurant the other day and was looking at the menu, and the guy said, "Hey, can I take your order?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, here we go!" So they had this chicken parmesan thing, and it was like 1,995 calories. I was like, I blew that whole goal out.
That's probably your daily limit in a day.
Yeah.
Or one meal.
Yeah.
One meal is your daily limit.
So that's how we make it specific, and that's how we make it measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Now, when we get to FAST, so this is another acronym. FAST really comes into play when you have someone or multiple people that are helping hold this accountable. So let's say it's your spouse and you're setting goals together. This is where FAST comes into play. Or if you're a leader and you have a team, this is where your team comes into play, okay? So the SMART is looking at the goal itself for yourself. FAST is really more kind of solo, yeah. FAST is really a collaborative thing. So here's what this stands for. The F stands for frequently discussed. Okay, so if you're getting in front of your team or you're meeting together with your spouse and looking at it, it's something you're talking about constantly, right? Mm-hmm. The A stands for ambitious, okay? Now, we did talk about in SMART, we wanted to make it something achievable, but we also want to make it something that, it wouldn't be ambitious to set a healthier goal and then say, I'm going to lose 1 pound in a quarter. I mean, I think anybody could probably figure out how to do that.
That's not really
right?
being healthy anyway.
That's right. And then we gave you a hint. The S actually stands for specific, okay? And so that's where the intersection happens, and then the T is transparent. So when you're getting in front of your team and, the transparent goal is, hey, we wanted to try to achieve this by the first quarter. Guys, we're not on pace to do that. So that's where that transparency comes in. So just, again, review FAST, something that's frequently discussed. A is ambitious, S is specific, and T is transparent. Mm-hmm. Those two things together really unlock what goal setting is all about. So what do you guys think about that? I mean, have you done this practice in the past?
Yes, so that's what I was going to ask. So with that, especially with what you guys just went through with the team, do y'all have an example that you could potentially share with our listeners? Maybe, maybe it's a goal, whether just something that y'all have done that you've set for 2025. So maybe our listeners say, okay, I see what they're doing, and maybe something they could even apply to their own teams, whether that's any type of business or personal, whatever that is.
Yeah, I got one. And before I do that, Brady, you were talking about SMART, FAST. So the other day, Sarah and I were talking about some 2025 things we wanted to be able to accomplish and do. And one of those for me was to lose a little bit of weight. All right. And so right now, throwing it out there, I'm 235. I'm 235. Okay. No, Starbucks is not going away. 235. So, and I asked her, I said, would you look up on your phone and see what a 6'2", 45-year-old man is supposed to be?
Though.
And she goes, yeah, I'll look it up. So she looked it up, and she kind of went,
185.
No, it was 174, and I busted out laughing. I said, "There's no way. There's no way I'm going to be 60 pounds lighter than I am now. That's unrealistic."
I don't even feel like if you lost 60 pounds, Benji, I feel like you would look sickly.
Melted away.
I don't feel like.
I don't think the R applies there with realistic.
No, so one of the things that we did, we came up with. Obviously, in our business, we are a mitigation and cleanup. And restoration, part of the restoration is reconstruction. And we want to be able to, many clients tell us today they want us to be a one-stop shop. They want us to do it all, start to finish. And they don't want the business interruption, or Miss Smith doesn't want to be out of her house longer than she has to be. And one of those things that we did was we said we want to close more reconstruction projects. And what that means is basically our mitigation team is finishing up. Miss Smith says, yep, get things done. So we're trying to not only close the job, but how can we get it done faster for her or their business than normally it takes in the insurance world to get it done. So that's some things, without going into the details, that's some of the things that we did. Smart was we wanted to be specific. We want to close more restoration projects. Measurable, we came up with a percentage of what we felt was, a good closing percentage, and so on and so forth. So that's, and then to Brady's point, the fast process, after the fact, we're going to be measuring this frequently. We're going to be looking at this frequently so that we can make better decisions as we go along. So that's just one example in your day-to-day business that you might have. Obviously, if you're not in the mitigation and restoration world like we are, there's things that you can put in place for your business specifically. Maybe it's a marketing goal. Maybe it's a financial goal. There's all kinds of things out there that you can do this practice with.
Yeah. I think you can apply it to any of that stuff, though. I mean, that's just a real life example for our listeners, like, hey, this is what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and Benji, one thing that we've talked about, in the past, and one of the things that we do, and not a lot of people are in favor of. I mean, we talk about we have a lot of meetings, but meetings is where fast happens, and so part of our recipe going into into this year is meeting with our leadership team weekly, meeting with them monthly, meeting with them quarterly, and then doing like a strategic plan at the end of the year. And so that's where the magic happens. Is we talked about having that strategic plan, just kind of putting it on the shelf and dusting it off, or letting it collect dust. The consistency is where fast happens.
But also it's not just meeting, right? Like, it's having intentionality.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. 100%.
And I think that was a huge thing for our team into this past year. Is, I mean, Monday mornings were long. Yeah, they were tough because, I mean, it was basically the first half of our day, right? Like, you got in, a little bit of time, and then we do it. But it was we knew it was on the agenda, and we had an agenda. And unless something came from it and we had to deviate, we stuck pretty close to it. So you knew how you were doing and where you were trying to get to by the end of the meeting.
Yeah, and Brady, I'm on a nonprofit, the Isaacson Foundation, which obviously the Isaacsons were our, previous ownership group with ServPro headquarters and all. But what Rick Isaacson did was he started a nonprofit to help churches. And one of the things, let's say it's your local church, right? You can still have this same practice as long as you measure it and you stay on top of it. A specific goal would be that we would love to see, this many salvations this year. It's kind of hard to measure salvations because unless someone's baptized, essentially, right? So you can measure it that way. But you always get those events where you have all the kids, they raise their hand for salvation, whatever. It's great. It's great. But still, you've got to be specific. You come up with a target, and that target might be that we want to see, this many new guests this year. But you got to figure out how to get them there, right? So you got all those things that play into factors. So again, it can apply to anything that you do. It doesn't specifically have to be business, so to speak.
Yeah. So here's what we would like you guys to do. We talked about this in the last episode. So here's another challenge: is take the 2 goals that you wrote down earlier, and again we talked about personal goals and professional goals, and just write one small action for each of those steps. Try to put it into that SMART and FAST, and then also think of something that you can start tomorrow to help you move forward on that journey. So I think what we want to kind of transition into, so that was making our goals actionable, but how do we connect goal setting and our faith? And so just to talk about this just a minute is, in strategic planning, we talked about one of the things that I've learned in C12 is the first thing that we want to do in strategic planning, and what we really need to do in goal setting is look up. And are we partnering with what God has for us? So, and this is really one of those questions, and this is like challenging to myself, is do I typically go into goal setting and say, all right, Lord, here are my goals, here are my plans, will you bless it? Instead of, Lord, what do you want me to do, and how can I partner with that? And so the first one is putting me first. The second one is putting him first, and we want to put him first. And then there's just 2 verses that I want to share here, and one that I read I think it was for the first time last year, and just one of those verses that just, hit me like in the gut, and it was James 1:5. And it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. And so I was like, wow, the Lord is saying, if you ask for wisdom, he'll give it to you, and he'll give it to you generously. I don't know about you guys, but wisdom from the Lord generously, that is something that I want like every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one is Proverbs 16:3, which says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. That's a promise. So if we commit to the Lord what our plans are, and we're seeking from him what the plans are, then he's gonna bless it. But he's actually gonna establish it. We want him to establish what those plans are and then follow what he's got for us. So what do you guys think about that as we start to look up?
Yeah, I mean, we can't do it without the Lord. I mean, everything that we have is his anyways. We're just the ones that are stewards of it. Yeah. So I totally agree with you that in order to stay on track, people will talk about all the time, you got this path and you got a choice. You come to a Y in the road, which way you're going to go. Everyone that tries to do well in life is going to end up, where they're supposed to go because that's the Lord's will. But sometimes we make the wrong choice and we go down the wrong path. And I think that we have to continue to look up for God's grace, God's counsel, his wisdom, because we can't do it on our own. If we're trying to put ourselves first, I'm just as guilty as anyone. We're trying to put ourselves first. Our plans are not going to work. We have to rely on what the Lord's will is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think too, in the end of the day, when you're setting goals, I mean, the goals that you're thinking through now, if they're not furthering the kingdom, they're not doing anything to honor God, then why are you? Like, that to me should be the first thing. Why are you doing that? So say, hey, I want my business to do $10,000 a month, right? You're like, hey, that puts me over 6 figures a year. This is my business. Well, that's great, but are you? What are you doing with that? Is it something where you're like, hey, I want it for myself, or are you saying, hey, doing this gives me the ability to tithe, at that 10% or above, right? Like, right. I think sometimes too, like that's just one example, but do those things allow you to do more? Are you able to say, hey, God only asked me to do 10%, but if I'm doing $10,000 a month, can I, instead of doing X amount of dollars, can I do this much? Can I say, hey, I'm not going to do 1,000, I'm going to do 1,500, let me do 15%, something like that. So I think sometimes too, when we think through those, are you taking time to pray about those things first? Like, all right, God, this is my selfish desire. This is what I want to do. But are these me, or do these things allow me to continue to work for the kingdom, allow me to do more? Really just to use the skill set you've given me to honor you through that skill set.
Well,
So
I'll say this, Adam. You're right on. I mean, because I believe that the Lord, he says in his word, he will give us the desires of our heart. So if we write our goals down, and as long as it's honoring him, everything to exactly what you said, as long as we're doing everything, doing our part to honor and please the Lord, I believe he'll give us the desires of our heart. It may not be in our timing. Yep. Okay. The tables. Now, I'm not going to use the term "the tables will turn" because it may not be it may not be right now. Brady and I have seen that multiple times over the last 5-8 years. And it's okay because it's not right now. Doesn't mean it won't happen. So you're exactly right. I do think the Lord will give us the desires of our heart if we're in his will, doing what he wants us to do and how he wants us to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's just something we got to think through. I mean, that's even something I brought up with even our own team. We did an evaluation of Christmas, and I had some things that I'm like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this better. But thinking through going into that, like, well, what do we want to achieve, in 2025? Is it, like you said, Benji, is there a certain amount of salvations we want, or
right?
Even selfishly, like, hey, do we want to be able to, maybe we want a certain type of gear, or, we want a certain thing, but what are we doing with that?
Yeah.
I think that's a question that you've got to ask as well, is like, all right, so we have this and we've got this, but what are we really doing? And I think to what you're saying, Brady, it doesn't matter if it's personal and business. What are you
Yep.
doing with those goals that you're
That's right.
personally honoring God? And then how do you honor God through your business? So people see that, hey, this is our forefront. This is why our business operates. This is why we're here.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's what we'd love for you guys to do is just, and we're giving you action steps per section here, but just take a moment to reflect. And if you've got those goals written down, is how are you aligning those 2025 goals to your faith? And are you looking up? And if you haven't done that, and it may be something you want to do now. So then, what do we do with all this? It's like, how do we make this? Because accountability is where things are going to get taken place. And so, when I think about accountability, it's daily accountability. And so, again, we're a big John Maxwell fan, and John Maxwell says that success is found in your daily agenda. And so, what are the practices that you guys can put into place of this daily accountability? Is it rewriting some of the big goals every single day, so you're putting it out there? Is it having some type of dry erase board on your refrigerator or somewhere in your house or at your office, or sticky notes, in your car? What is that daily reminder of how you're going to stay motivated to achieving those goals? Because unless it's in your face, unless you're constantly seeing it all the time, then it's probably going to be, again, like that strategic plan that just sits on the shelf and collects dust. So it's something that you have to be reminded of constantly. What are your guys' thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree. You have to keep it in front of you all the time, because you've got to make sure that it's front and center, and you've got to be able to act on it. You talked about being able to write them down, make a task list, because there are some goals that you can't achieve with the flip of a light switch. You've got to be able. It take time and time over to make sure that it is gonna work out for you. But if you don't measure it daily, if you don't look at it daily, I'm not saying, you have your goals all written down 1 to 20, and you're like, how am I going to which one am I going to choose first? You got to pick one, pick two.
Yeah.
But to your point, if you keep them in front of you, you act on them, and you're working towards achieving that. Case in point, I have a task list I use every day. We've talked about that. And my goal at the end of every day is to complete all my task lists, whether it's a personal task, something I got to do at home, or maybe it's a business task or a church task, whatever. My goal is to get those accomplished. But if I don't, I roll them to the next day until I get them accomplished. Yeah. And so, to your point, success is found in our daily agenda. If we're not constantly keeping it front and center of it, we're going to forget about it. And you don't want to just let it, sit on the shelf, essentially, like you said, and collect dust. So I agree. Keep it in front of you. Keep yourself accountable to that. Because, or maybe it is find someone that can help hold you accountable to it.
Yeah, and I share with y'all on in part one. I mean, one of the things I do is try to write down each night. Okay, what do I want to achieve the next day? What do I want to do in the morning before work? What I want to do before lunch? What I want to do after lunch? And what I want to do in the evening? And that was something I had gotten from one of my mentor courses that I was in. Splitting it up into days. That way, again, it doesn't look as large. It doesn't look as big. And then one of the things I've tried to do over the past 6 or 7 months is have, like, on the front of my phone, have that in the hotspot, especially on the iPhones now, where you can have a widget. I try to have a to-do thing. Like, if somebody says, hey, Adam, we need to get this done, I can just hold that, and immediately opens up my to-do app, goes right to it. I can type it in, put in when it needs to be due. I have labels for everything, so I can do all those things and get them done quick. And that's really, for me, like you're talking about accountability, is I see that on my phone every time I need it. I can get to it quickly. And then I also have on the front page of my iPhone, in the top corner, I have what needs to be done for today. Yeah. So if things don't get done, that little red, it starts to turn red, and I'm like, I got to get this done. It's going past. Like, if I've got to work on something for you guys or personally, doesn't matter what I labeled it. If it's something for my wife, if it's something for work, if it's something for my business, I have that set. So it doesn't matter what it's labeled. It's on the front of my screen, and it's in my face. I hate I hate the little red marks. And
Well,
so
front
I'm
and
like,
center though, but see that's the way you do it. That's the way. That's what works for you. Same thing for me. Same thing for Brady. Keeping it front and center. Maybe someone has it. They print it out and they laminate it and they stick it on their desk and it just stays there. Whatever works for you. Keep yourself accountable so you're looking at it all the time.
Yeah, we were recording for you guys last week, Brady. We were recording a video for 7 Habits, like one of the testimonials about it. And the person we were interviewing was talking about goal setting and things they did. And they talked about, they spent a lot of time in their bathroom in the morning. And she shared, I put a calendar on my bathroom. I was like, it was in my kitchen. And I'm like, well, I never really see it. And I spend time in the morning for work. Just put it on my mirror. She's like, I got a double vanity. I'm the only one using it. So, but then she shared that she was like, well, then I started writing on there and I got too much. And I started writing on the mirror and then I started. So she was like, the right half of my bathroom mirror has like my to-do list. And she's like, I see it all morning while I'm getting ready. So again, like you're talking about, Benji, what works for you and where do you see it? She said, hey, I'm the only one at the house. I spend a lot of time getting ready in the mornings and it stays front and center while I'm getting ready. So, somebody like me, I use my phone a lot, digital marketing, social media. I'm constantly having to share things, post things, create things. So for me, having it on my phone, I see it a lot. So that just works better for me.
And listen, if you are a technology person, there was a feature that was added back in so many different platforms that just changed my life years ago. And a lot of these technology platforms have a snooze feature. And so if you're a like Tenacity is on the top of my list, and so when I see a list of things that need to be done or a bunch of emails that are out there, it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to get these things knocked out. Snooze it to the next day. Snooze the task to the next day. And so I feel like I've gotten it accomplished. It's out. My brain's clear. And so if you are a technology person, that's just a tip for you.
And for those of you that use email all the time, they have a snooze feature for Gmail, even Apple now. You've got
so
it.
powerful.
It's gotten to where if you send somebody an email and you ask a question and you don't get a response, I don't know if you've noticed, it sends you an email back. Yeah, it sends you. It's not an email, but it's just a follow-up notification. It says, "Hey, you sent this to Brady yesterday, and he didn't respond. Do you need to follow up again?" And you're like,
and then you can click that ignore follow-up. If you want to.
Yep.
Adam, I got one of those this week. I sent you an email last week. You didn't respond to me.
You didn't send me one.
No, I'm just kidding.
I was about to say, hold on. I respond immediately.
So the last challenge on here is just share your goals with somebody this week.
Yeah.
That's that accountability person. Again, if you're married, talk to your spouse. If it's a more of like a leadership team environment, take your goals and share it with the team. But then the second part of that is schedule some type of check-in. I know Melissa and I typically at least once a quarter we will go over our goals and look at them and see what we've accomplished and setting out anything new. So just encourage you to do that. Well, guys,
I got something, Brady, for our listeners. If you're watching us on YouTube, put one of the goals that you have in there.
Oh yeah,
right in the chat.
That would be great.
If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever platform, on our website, higheruppodcast.com, there's a button right there. You can click send us a text. It'll send us a text, and we'd love to read some of those. We won't mention your name. We'd love to read some of those over the air just to help. Really maybe it helps someone else. So you've got options. We can help hold you accountable to that if you need.
Yeah, I love it. So just kind of as we close out, I mean, we've talked about a lot in the last 2 episodes. You may have to, sometimes when I listen to a podcast, I may speed it up, because I want to get all the content in. This may be one of those that you want to slow down and do it like at a 0.75 or something like that.
Yeah, especially if you're writing those down. Especially if you're writing stuff down.
And remember, don't do this and don't write it down in the car. But we've talked about a lot. Why goals matter. The power of actually writing down the goals. Making them actionable, keeping it aligned with your faith, and then staying accountable. And just as a reminder, what we talked about at the very beginning was Brian Tracy says that only 3% of people actually write down their goals, and then only 1% of those actually do something about the goals that they write down. So our challenge to you was, just do you want to be a part of the 3%? And we kind of looked at it in your circle of people that you come in contact with every day. That's 3 out of every 100 people that you come in contact with. So now, just as we kind of wrap up a little bit, we're not necessarily talking about this being perfection. Okay, so don't try to be perfect in setting your goals. If it's the first time you've ever done it, don't try to get it right the very first time. You are gonna make mistakes. There are things that are gonna be that are gonna happen. But I guess the goal of setting goals is just not perfection, but progress. Yeah. And so if you start the process in 2025, make it better in 26 and 27, 28. Yeah.
Well, remember, perfection means you've reached the end. Mm-hmm. I always tell our team, I've always told our team that when it's all about think about the words that you're using, your verbiage. Perfection means you can't get any, perfect's perfect, right? That's a 10 out of 10. That's 100 out of 100. You can't get better, Yep. So strive for excellence, because excellence means you're achieving progress, right? Excellence means you're doing things right. You're doing things to get better with every step of the way. And so that's one of the things that we always tell our teams as well is like, go for excellence. What can you do that's excellent? But what's great about excellence is always a work in progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Adam. So think about this. This is we actually have this in our core values of our team, but it says we will never be perfect, okay? But in the pursuit of perfection, maybe we will catch excellence. So I think that's a really, really good point. And so again, this is a daily thing, a daily habit. We've talked about Craig Rochelle on the podcast before, great leadership guru, but this is what he says. He says that successful people do consistently what others do occasionally. And it's not a big thing, not big things. But if you just be consistent, if you will commit to the process and you'll commit to looking at it every day and whatever that system is, then I promise you that you'll see, as long as you're going to be consistent in 2025, I promise you'll see progress in the things that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Love it. That's good stuff. That's good. That's a lot, like you said, a lot to chew on.
It's a lot.
But I think it's a great way to start out 2025. So that way, like I said, you don't have to start your goals on day one. You got plenty of time. You can kind of sit and go through these things and figure out, what do I want? Like maybe February 1st, you're like, all right, I've listened to this. I need to sit down and do some thinking. And that gives you a starting point. So. Yeah,
and to Adam's point, if you need help, reach out to us. We'd love to be honored to serve alongside you and whatever we can do to help. There's multiple ways you can connect with us, social media. You got all the different platforms and all that. But as we always say on Higher Up, go out and choose to live a higher up life. See you next time.